Hey, Catie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm super excited to have you here. I would love to hear in your own words just a little bit about your background for anybody who's listening who doesn't know about you and the amazing work you do. Can you walk us through just a little bit of your work experience?
Sure. So, Valerie, I'm so excited to get to have this conversation with you. And yeah, I mean, I'm an executive coach by trade, and that is an unlikely path if you look at my resume. So, if you looked me up on LinkedIn, you'd say she worked for the government, she worked for Butterball, she worked for an adoption agency. She's been all over the place. And all of that's true. But really, I've been on the hunt to really understand what exceptional leadership looks like. Not just good leadership or great leadership, but like exceptional leadership. And so I've had the great fortune working in for-profit, nonprofit, government organizations, very small, like mom and pop organizations, to companies that are several 100,000 employee companies, and working in really all different levels of the organization, but really focusing on that leadership level to see what does it take to lead in the modern world. And from that, I've been very fortunate to get to shadow leaders, get to coach, mentor, and then teach leaders all over the world. And so that's what I do. That's my bread and butter. It's really what gets me out of bed in the morning. I love reading about leadership, talking about leadership. I just got off of a conversation with a couple of leaders who were looking for a new coach to support a leader in their organization. And man, I've been looking forward to that for days, because I think, gosh, if we can help this guy be better, that's going to mean his team is more empowered and his team is more energized. And yeah, so I mean, I am a coach all day, every day. That's what I love to do. And I feel very blessed and fortunate to get to do that work.
That's so cool. And I don't feel like there's enough training around how to become a leader. I was always like the
Yeah.
classic good employee who then got promoted to be a manager. And I was like, this is totally different. Like being a good employee is very different than looking after other people. And so I'm curious, I know it's probably a huge answer, but what are a few of the things that you think make someone an exceptional leader? What are some like values that they share?
That's a, you just asked me to boil the ocean. But honestly, it's the best leaders are the ones who are not in it for themselves at all. They don't really, they're not looking for, when am I going to be a vice president, or when am I going to run this region? They're looking at, how do I develop this person behind me? How do I support people and their experience when they come to work every day? How do I make them better and happy and satisfied in the work that they do? Leadership, when it's done really well, has nothing to do with the individual. It has everything to do with the team. And so the best leaders are not the ones who are thinking about, how do I write the best emails, or how do I present the best, or it's not any of that. It's really about, how do I make sure that this person feels supported? How do I make sure that I can bring the best out of these people who come to my team with a bunch of gifts and talents and capabilities? How do I make them really successful? The best leaders are the ones that are thinking about everybody else on their teams and really less of themselves.
That's so interesting and not what I was expecting to hear, but amazing. And it sounds like to me, based on the answer, that like leadership is very much something you can learn. Like, do you think there's like born leaders, or do you think it's really just like a skill that you have to learn how to do?
Yeah, I don't think it's a born thing. I do think there are people who are more naturally inclined to want to lead people. Um, I'll give you an example. So my my mom's a great example of somebody who was a federal executive, a leader for many, many, many years. But she would tell you she would rather take somebody's vision, strategy, and plan and be the person who puts it into place. If you looked at her versus me, you'd say, well, Katie's the natural leader, but really she's the engine behind it. I'm just willing to stand up in front and speak with a very loud voice and say, yeah, just come on and follow me. But if I don't have someone like her alongside of me, it doesn't work. So what I've learned over the years, and I think that's why I've chosen the career path that I've been on, is there are fundamental skills that you have to learn that complement whatever it is that you naturally show up with in the world that help you on your leadership journey. And so for some people, it's learning how to communicate better. For other people, it might be how they share an inspirational message. For other people, it might be teaching them how to be more empathetic leaders. It comes in various shapes and sizes and stuff like that. But I do think the majority of what it takes to be a leader is really a set of skills versus an innate capability.
That's so good to hear. And when these leaders are investing in their team members to support them, is there structure behind it? Is it different per person? Like, how do you really best support your team members?
I think it's getting to know everybody individually. It really is. Like, I think that's such a smart question because a lot of times people just want to do one thing for everyone. And that can be really challenging because everybody comes to the table with different needs. And so I'm constantly encouraging people to find out, what motivates your team, what really lights them up, what made them want to join the organization or the team that they're on. Why are they here? And then pour into them based on what motivates them now and really what it is that they want to do. There are some people that just want to show up every day and just do a good job at the thing that they're doing all day and every day. They don't care about promotion. They don't care about anything, about any accolades or awards. Great. How do we fill those people up? There are people who want to be promoted or want to get into a new leadership level. Great. How do we fill those people up? Like, it's really a person by person kind of situation. And so, yeah, it's so smart that you asked that. It's really important to focus on every single person on your team as an individual versus just trying to do one thing for the whole.
That makes sense because I think about how I have two kids and they're motivated differently, like totally different personalities from day one. And so that would make sense that each person on your team also completely different needs, completely different goals.
For sure.
Um, that's fantastic. And when you worked in these different organizations, how was the leadership the same in them? Like, is the way you lead a Fortune 500 company the same as the way you lead like an adoption agency versus like federal? Like, does leadership look the same in all industries? And what do they do different depending on like the sector that they're in?
So it does look the same. And everybody wants to say, oh, but our company's different, or our organization's different, or our federal agency is different. And I learned after a couple of years in the business to go, okay, but because they're not, it really isn't. The same challenges with every team are consistent from company to company. It's communication, it's accountability, it is being able to have hard conversations, it's giving feedback, it's being able to do reward and recognition really well. And every kind of company or organization, nonprofit, for-profit, government, they all struggle with the same things. So leadership, that what changes is the context. So in the military, for example, everything is top down because that's the way it's designed. I work with lots of organizations. It's very flat. It's like one leader and then lots of other people who help drive the organization. It's not the same, but the same kinds of like interpersonal challenges and team challenges still exist. So I think one of the things that I've learned over time is it's important for me to go in and understand the context. But the reality is these are human beings doing human things with each other. And that means the same human problems are showing up everywhere. It just, the context is just very different.
That's so interesting. And well, we work with a lot of different businesses and same thing, different sectors, same problems. One of the problems that clients come to us about complaining is like the work ethic of their team members or they're not hustling enough. I have my own thoughts on that, but I'm curious when you hear a leader say like my team members are quitting, they're going to other companies where they get paid better. What is the real root cause? Because we know it's not just that. So what is the root cause with what these leaders are saying?
It's not. And I know that even in this day and age, people want to say, oh, well, it's the economy and that's what's changing everything. It's not. Nothing has changed. It is the people that you work for. It's the company, it's the organization, it's the culture that determines whether or not somebody wants to stay. So the best example I have is that adoption agency that I worked for. It's an organization called Kinship Center out in California. Very progressive, really amazing work that they do. But the thing that I was struck by when I worked there is the co-founders, they could only pay, there was a nonprofit, they could only pay so much for the work that the workers were doing. And you could get a job with the local government, like the county government, and get paid 20, 30, $40,000 more a year. That was significant. These were social workers, these people who were doing yeoman's work, really helping very challenging situations with families and children. And $40,000 is a lot of money. And that was a lot of money. This is back in like 2008, 2009. It was a lot of money. And the economy was terrible then as it is now. And people stayed in that organization regardless because they were treated with respect. They had a great environment to work in. They were given professional development, and they didn't have to work like obscene hours or have an obscene caseload. It was like everything that we did was really reasonable. It was great. They were able to give great service to families and children. They did really wonderful work. And this organization was so amazing that when I left the organization in like 2010 or 2011, I came back a year later. I was living in Washington, D.C. I flew back to California to run a marathon. And one of the things that we did when somebody left the organization in good standing was that they had a potluck lunch or dinner or something for everybody. They threw me a potluck lunch a year after I had left this place because they were like, we want to honor your service. We want to honor your contributions to the organization. Like, who does that? Who does that? Like that kind of experience, like, why wouldn't you work there? Why wouldn't you want to go, well, yes, could I make more money? Sure. But am I going to be treated like an adult with respect and my gifts can come fully to the surface? Yeah, they totally could. So they did not have turnover. We didn't fire people. We didn't have people quitting all the time. But I've seen that happen in lots of other organizations when you treat people with respect, when you can fill their bucket up, like giving them work that motivates them, that really fuels them, give them a good environment to work in. People don't leave. And it's a differentiator that I think a lot of companies overlook.
Oh, so much so, because I think everybody thinks it's just 50 cents more an hour or like a slight bonus here and there. And what you're saying is like the total opposite. But when I put myself in the shoes of people who would work there, I would also 100% choose that organization over an
Yeah,
additional 40,000 because you would just you'd hate your job. You'd hate your life. Like it's like a no-brainer. Um,
exactly.
it sounds like that company was really good with recognition. Obviously, throwing you a potluck is amazing. What are some other ways leaders can show good recognition? Is it like a daily thing, a weekly thing when big things happen? Like, how does that look from like a practical standpoint for other business leaders?
So this goes back to your question earlier around, how do you really, make sure that you're leading people in the right way is, so you have to know what motivates people and lights them up. So for for some people, it might be giving them an award in front of everyone when they've done something big. For somebody else, it might mean giving them a gift card to say, take your spouse out to dinner or your partner out to dinner and congratulations for accomplishing this great thing. For somebody else, it might mean giving them a stretch assignment somewhere or sending them to a conference or to some training that they've really wanted to do. It should be a consistent thing. So it doesn't need to necessarily be a daily thing. It should be a consistent thing that, Valerie, if you're working for somebody in an organization, they should be thinking like, what's going to light her up? What is going to be meaningful to Valerie, which is going to be different than what's meaningful to Catie. And so what they do for you should be what's, something different to me, but we'll both be excited because we're getting that bucket filled. So it's less about like, what can I do every day versus what should I be doing on a consistent basis for the people? And am I really sure about what it is that is going to be meaningful for them?
That again, that makes so much sense. I'm just thinking about like my sister and how like the different love languages. Like my sister and I
Mm-hmm.
talk about that all the time. She's like a gift giver. I could care less about getting gifts, but words of affirmation, totally my jam. So yeah, I could just even see if we had like the same leader, how they would treat us differently, like accordingly. And that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like it really is knowing your team like individually. And question for you is how do you do that with remote team members? Because obviously like at Cradle, everything we do is like placing remote virtual assistants and cold callers into US companies. What are some ways that you've seen leaders integrate remote talent, especially after COVID, in a way that makes sense?
Okay, so I'm so glad you asked that question. I have talked about this, and every time somebody asks me this question, I'm just going to get on a pedestal and talk about it more. Every interaction that you have with somebody needs to be meaningful. The end. So a one-on-one, a phone call, a text message, an email that you send to them, team meetings, whatever kinds of gatherings, it needs to have intention and purpose behind it. So when 2020 hit and I was working for a company at the time, I wasn't working for myself just yet. I was working for a company at the time, and most of us were all over the country. But when we got together, it wasn't just that we spent time like, hey, Valerie, how's your day? And how's your dog? And whatever. I mean, we did some of that too, but every agenda meant something. We were using people's time really effectively. And part of that time was to spend time getting to know each other and do this interpersonal thing. And it got to be the point where I was coaching people for 18 to 24 months before I'd ever met them in person. And one of the reasons why was because of restrictions that we had with, travel in the US. But the reality was I lived somewhere different than they did. But every time we got together, I made sure that our agendas and our purpose in the meeting was very, very clear so that people felt like it was a great use of time. You didn't feel like you were just kind of killing time. And I think that we got kind of lazy before we had to go virtual in this way. So now when I think about like distributed teams, virtual teams, however you want to think about it, I think that you can have the same kind of culture that people used to think that they had when everybody was in the office together by just being intentional with every interaction. If you can do that and make it that someone goes, I had this great meeting at 10 o'clock this morning with Valerie, then you've done your job. So, but if they're not doing that and they're just checking the box like, yeah, I met with Valerie and I met with Catie. And if it doesn't mean anything, then it doesn't matter if we're in the office or not. But if you can make it so that people look forward to your call, look forward to your text or email or whatever, then you're good to go. So I think the best companies were doing that in person before we all had to go virtual. But now that you're virtual, then just be intentional with every interaction you have.
Wow, that's so good. And that, again, like you should just be intentional with every part of your life. So just making sure that you're doing that as a leader and meeting with your team. That makes so much sense. When you go into most organizations now and help them, is there anything that you implement that people are initially like against or think is unusual or like didn't see before? Or like what are some like the common things you probably start off doing?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm writing a book around emotional intelligence, but I'm not talking about emotional intelligence, because people don't want to think that they're not emotionally intelligent. They think that they're empathetic and they're not always. And so I talk a lot about feelings. And in real life, if you met me, you'd say, she's not the person, she's not super mushy. I don't cry a lot. I'm not like that. Like you wouldn't think that I'd be somebody who's all up in my feelings. But I talk a lot about that when I work with executive teams and leaders and there are roadblocks and challenges. It's because usually people aren't talking about how they feel about something. They're not being honest with the way that they're feeling about the thing that's happening. And it could be the way that they feel about a strategy or the way they feel about, oh gosh, it could be almost anything, Valerie. But it's really, feelings is a big thing that I talk about. And so I have to find ways to talk about it without people going, oh, she's going to come in and talk about Feelings. It's my favorite F word.
I was
Feelings.
gonna say I saw that on your website. You help people use the F word, and I laughed so
It's
hard.
true. It's so true because and though and inevitably people will roll their eyes and go, oh, well, okay, if I'm being honest, what I really feel is because there is an underlying emotion that drives what we think about, that drives what we do, and it drives then the results that we get. So let's just be honest about how we're feeling about things. And so, yeah, I there that is getting people to tap into their emotional center through a bunch of different means. And I can do that through looking at a strategic plan as much as I can do it through play or something else. That's what I'm trying to do. But and eventually over time, people go, oh, you want us to talk about our feelings. I'm like, I want you to talk about your feelings because that is the thing, that is the driving force behind everything that you do. And so when I can get leaders to do that and really be honest with each other and connect on that emotional level, all sorts of magical, awesome things happen.
You use the word magic a lot as well. Like when I was on, like I've seen that you say like when it was the last time work felt like magic, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I could just like I was like, wow, like that question is not asked a lot. And there are parts of what we do at Cradle where I can like sense the magic. Like sometimes when we do an interview and the client and the candidate like hits it off in like some magical way, you didn't even know that they both shared the most weird hobby ever. Like you can feel it. But talk more about like what does magic mean for you in the workplace and how do you actually create it?
So it's when people are bringing all their fullest self, all their gifts, all their capabilities and skills and whatnot to the table all at once. They're doing it in an honest, genuine way. When that happens, we make really great decisions on who we hire, as you were talking about, putting a team together, solving a problem, even if it's really hard or the stakes are really risky or significant. When you can feel all of that coming together and you're like, I don't know how we're doing it, but we are. Um, I've experienced that in the workplace before, but I've also like read about it. Stanley McChrystal was a great, when he wrote his book, Team of Teams, he talks a lot about the work that he was doing in Afghanistan, which is very counter to how most military operations worked. But when I read his book, I went, ooh, he was doing a little bit of magic there because he was putting people, he was aligning people to be able to show up with all of their gifts, all of their skills, capabilities, with their whole heart and person to do what it is that they needed to do on those missions. But I see that in corporate America all the time when the leaders are going, okay, Valerie's a little outspoken, but we need that here. So we're going to let her be outspoken. And let's say Catie's super reserved. We're going to let her do that because the two of them together, Catie's going to keep Valerie in check and Valerie's going to make sure that Catie stretches a little bit. It's pulling all of those things together, but you have to do the work behind that to say, what are everybody's skills and gifts? And can we all agree that we want everyone around the table to bring that together? And when that happens, yeah, it does feel like magic. You do really cool things on behalf of your customer or client or whomever that you're trying to serve. And I think that's what, I don't know that that's why people go to work. They go to work for a paycheck and to live and everything else. But when you've worked in a company or on a team and you've experienced that magic a little bit and you get a taste for it, you kind of want it again. And so for me, thinking about being a leadership development professional, I want to help leaders be able to create that for people. So that's why we talk about getting to know your people, developing really good communication skills, like whatever I can do to help them get under the hood for themselves and for their people. Because when you can do that, you can kind of create the alchemy to make that magic in your team or on your workplace.
That's so cool. This is like such a different way. I think people don't see leadership now, and it makes so much sense, and it would make that position so much more fulfilling. I have three more questions for you.
Okay.
First one is you have like two daughters, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you do work and mom life at the same time? It's something that I always think about. A lot of our clients are women. How do you balance it? Like, are you doing like a full 40 hours? Are they in daycare? Do you have relatives? Like, tell me how you're able to do both.
So, you asked such a great question. And I was having a conversation with somebody last week about this too, because they are like 10 years behind me in their parenting journey. When my girls were really little, we made the decision when I was married at the time, we made the decision to have a nanny. I had two different nannies that were exceptional. Um, and both of these women, if they had not stepped in and been like the other half of my mom brain, you and I would not be sitting here talking to each other. That's just it. So I found a way to make that work. I was working in the nonprofit world at the time, so majority of my salary was going to pay them, but it allowed me to get the experience that I needed at the time to be able to progress in my career. So nannies helped because they were the ones that I said, we need to plan a birthday party. And they went, oh, okay, I can figure out a good unicorn birthday party. And I have two girls, so it was inevitable a unicorn birthday party was going to
Of
happen.
course.
And they were able to help put that together for me. Now it's progressed where I have girls that are one's in elementary school, she's in fifth grade, and the other one is in high school. And I'm very explicit with them. And it started during COVID when they were at home for half a year and they could see what mama did for her job. I was, giving webinars for thousands of people and coaching people one-on-one. And they would sit in the corner of my office off screen, can we listen in and just see what this is like? And then they understood I was supporting a lot of people. And so now I keep a very tight schedule when they're at school. And when I pick them up, sometimes I have meetings after work and they know these meetings are important. Or if somebody's calling me and I say, this is for work, they understand, or this is a coaching client, they get it. But it is a lot of orchestration. It's a lot of balancing. And I will tell you that I don't have it figured out. I probably I fail them at some point every week. I don't know what I've done today. I've done something. I haven't figured that out yet. I haven't figured out, did someone's soccer jersey not get cleaned, or I didn't pick up this thing for theater. There's something in there. But I think at the end of the day, it is trying to find the village around you that can help you be successful. And that is still, I have a bunch of single moms who are local to me that will help pick up my kids after school if I can't do it. I have a couple of babysitters in the neighborhood who have had to stay later than they expected to because the flight that I was taking home to be able to be at home with my girls got delayed multiple times. It's just it really is a village mentality to be able to do this. So I am by no means the poster child for any of this, except for I'm knitting it together. I'm doing the best I can.
No, what you said makes sense. When I lived in Ethiopia, like everybody in Ethiopia and most African countries has like a nanny. So we used to have a nanny that like lived with us. Like it's very affordable. It's like the common, like everybody has one. It's the norm. But it meant like I had someone to help like clean the house and make food and do dishes. And it made so much of a big difference in my ability to work and be a mom and be like a person outside of both of those. And I always just feel like American moms are screwed. Like unless you have a nanny or like a family nearby, the way we've set it up is so much more challenging in the US than in other countries. So that's cool to hear that like you also had a nanny. And I wish I wish more women could have that in America.
Well, so let me just put a little caveat in there too. Like, Ashley was our nanny when we lived in Virginia and Maryland, and she ended up building her family while she was working for us. She brought her little baby to work with us. Cassie was our nanny when we lived in Florida, and same thing. We hired her, and her son was 6-7 weeks old, and she said, "I need work," and we said, "Great, just bring him along," and he kind of was our little, and we had two girls and a little boy in our house, and that was just kind of how it was. So in retrospect, I was thinking very differently about being flexible in the workplace. And we paid them really well. They had paid time off. They had one of them went on maternity leave, and I found a fill-in nanny for her while she had a child. I mean, I was trying to figure out how to make this work for them too. And it was a great bridge for them to get into the next part of their professional career. So, but I would not be where I am today. We would not be talking today if it weren't for Ashley and Cassie being supporting me and my girls.
That's so sweet. Well, shout out to them. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, and then question, the next question I already told you I was going to ask you. You're launching two podcasts. So my
Yeah.
first question was why two? And tell me what they are, when they're launching, all the details.
Well, if you ask my mom, she would just say, Katie doesn't do anything the easy way. So here's the two podcasts. So I'm writing a book and it's based off of a coaching framework that I put together. So that's the book is going to be titled Surrender the Moment. The podcast is Surrender the Moment. And it's really coaching people live on the show and working them through the framework so that people who are coaches or who are leading teams or mentoring people can really see how to use the methodology. The other podcast is called Corporate Baggage, and my girlfriend Whitney Siders, she and I worked together years ago, and we actually started a TikTok account. And the reason for us starting the account was to sort of, in a way, share our knowledge that we were picking up from working with the clients that we did. But what we were really more interested in doing is reacting to the ridiculous decisions that leaders make in organizations. So when they're, for example, like, it's not as common nowadays, but like the companies that like lay off thousands of people over Zoom, that kind of thing. So we started a TikTok account. We had some videos that went viral and we just said, you know what, let's just talk about how this really impacts people from the leadership perspective, from the employee perspective, and a different way to maybe think about not making these same mistakes. And so, yeah, so we're launching I'm launching that one at the same time I'm launching the coaching one too.
Those both sound really good. Okay, that's amazing. I'm very excited to tune into both of those. And that actually makes sense. I get it now. That is justified. Two podcasts makes total sense. Okay, last question is, well, most of our audience is in the US. We do have a few of our team members who tune in from the African continent. And one question they always want to know is, have you ever been to an African country before? If so, where? And where would you like to travel in Africa?
So no, I haven't yet. It's on my bucket list to actually go across the continent. When I was growing up, we had a family that lived down the street. They went to the same Catholic school that we did, and they were from Ghana. And they immigrated, I want to say when I was in second or third grade. And it was three girls. And they just kind of got plopped into this very generically white Northern Virginia kind of ecosystem. And I don't know how they did it. I really don't. But they used to talk about what it was like where they came from. And I was fascinated from being a little kid. And then as an adult, I made friends with a man who worked in the building that I worked in Washington, D.C., who's from Somalia. And he was like, Katie,
Cool.
you need to come and visit. It's a beautiful country. Don't believe everything that you just, see and read in the United States. It's very different from what you've been told. And so, yeah, it's on my list of places to go. I've never been. I kind of feel like I don't want to go as a tourist. I would rather go and be invited, if that makes sense. Like go with somebody who says, come to my country, let me show you, and go with somebody, because I would like to go. I don't do touristy stuff anywhere, even in the US. I want to go and stay with someone's family and, just be immersed in a culture as opposed to like go and tour around. So
100%.
One day, Valerie, I'm waiting for the invitation and I'm hoping one day that will come because it would be an honor. I would love to.
I feel like you're going to get some invitations after this. Well, we have team members everywhere. So if you ever end up going, we're going to get you in touch. But if not, that's like very exciting. And
Love it.
I always say, like, I think there's like a quote about how like you're like jealous of the person who's never been to Africa because they have so much to look forward to. And you're right, like what that guy told you is right. Like you can't really picture it or know it until you get there because everything we've been told about it is like totally different.
I believe it.
Cool. And Katie, so I know people can find you at catiecampbell.com, CATIE Campbell.com. We'll put that in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to say or point people to after this?
No, Valerie, I'm just so thrilled to get to spend the time with you today, and I just really appreciate it. So, and if anybody wants to reach out, connect with me on social media, and they find me, the answer is always yes. So I totally welcome that.
Cool. Thank you so much, Catie.